very much for inviting me for this financial inclusion workshop. Recently, I'm attending many government workshops, but discussions are very different levels of today. Among governments, there's no regulations, no data, and they are talking about what's going on. So I'm very much learned today. Today, I would like to talk about the financial inclusion and financial education, combining actual policy and some empirical analysis. And there are four issues I would like to talk to. First one is financial inclusion, access to finance. And I would like to talk about the use of postal network. In Indonesia, only 20% of the people have access to finance. There are so many islands, but each island, they have post office. And then Myanmar, about 10% of the people are holding bank account. But postal networks are all over Myanmar. So first part, I would like to discuss about use of postal network. Second one is financial education. And I'm specifically focusing on Japanese case, why financial education in schools are difficult. And number three, financial educations are needed not only for schools, but also SMEs and elderlies. And last one is financial inclusion, the financial access. We have to also talk about credit, especially money lenders. So those are the four topics I would like to discuss today. And post office, in many European countries has post office. But when we discuss post office in the US, they said no. And when I discuss in Europe, Germany, France, everybody understands the importance of postal network. So I would like to first show the data. This is a case of Japan. Post office has 24,293 branch offices. And then banks, 3,568. So you can see the huge number difference between major banks and postal savings. And post office, about 38% are in rural area. If you look at the top, major banks, 97% are large cities. And some of the long-term credit bank, trust banks, 100% are concentrated on cities. So in rural area, local part, agricultural banks and post offices are dominating the market. Then post office is a very easy, excuse me, this is different from my screen. Okay. And post office is a very easy access, as you can see here, and very friendly atmosphere, and very easy for the local people to access. There's a joke, when the local farmers try to go to the bank, they have to wear good clothes. But for post office, they can just go regular clothes. So that is why it is very easy to access. But when I was discussing in Myanmar and Indonesia, they are very much concerned about postal workers. They may hide those money into the pocket. So that they asked me why Japan was so successful in postal networks. I think in Japanese case, postmaster was chosen in each village where the person is very trusted. Then trust and honest was very important when postal network was established. So people believe if he were the postmaster, we want to make deposits. So I think the who will become the postmaster is very important. And also the postal bank now is under the regulation of financial deposit insurance. So that's why people also feel it is very safe. And then postal network, I have said, so many branch offices. And there are three characteristics for post bank compared to regular banks. Post office handles mail service, postal savings, and also in Japanese case, post office collect life insurance. So short-term deposits and also long-term deposits are collected. And many people have to prepare for their lifetime after retirement. So the life insurance is very important. And access to post office created those accessibilities. And then next, we have to talk about how these money be utilized. There are 3 or 4 types of how to utilize those post office. The top one is the Japanese style. Postal savings and also pension money has been kept into Ministry of Finance. Then Ministry of Finance allocated those money through government banks, loans to SMEs, and infrastructure. In many developing countries, including in Asian region, infrastructure is lacking. But some of the countries, infrastructure is relying on current account, taxpayers' money. And in Japanese case, and probably in Korean case too, that this money comes from pension funds and postal savings, which was separate from current account. It is not coming from taxpayers' money. So that means infrastructure investment have been pursued without affecting to the government deficits. So the first type is utilize these postal savings, insurance, pension funds to long-term financing. Second one is to sell private financial products through postal network. So the government does not come into the collecting products. So post office will become a sales agent. So people can access to plenty of financial products, including probably mutual funds, stocks, bonds, and insurance and deposits. And they are sold through postal network. Then postmasters does not have to do anything. Just they can transfer money from post office to each private financial institutions. If this is the case, people has to learn, education is very important, what kind of products they should invest. Then the third case is post office money is just invested into government bond. So there's nothing to asset management. Collect postal money and then invest into government bonds. Or they can sell government bond through postal network. I think Indonesia is selling government bonds through postal network and bankings. Then last one is postal savings becomes its own bank, and they can lend money to various sectors. I think fourth one is very dangerous because post office is very good at collecting money, but they don't know how to allocate their money. So the fourth one is not proposed, but the second one may be the best. And the first case is sometimes government accumulated non-performing loans because SMEs are very risky, infrastructure investments are not so profitable. The probably second or third may be the ideal proposal for utilize of post office. And postal network has a superiority, mail service, postal savings, and postal life insurance. So they have economies of scope because one post office can handle 3 products. And currently in Japan, postal mail service is in deficits. So postal savings and postal life insurance, in a sense, cover the cost of post office. So I think coming into the financial activities may also be important in developing countries. And also social security payment are made through post office. So that is another importance is easy access to post office. Then I'd like another example of the savings ratio of Japan. We have 1603 to 1868. It was Edo Knight Samurai period. And there was a custom, samurai or knight people should not save. They should just live every day. So when in 1868, Japan's household savings ratio was almost 0. And Mr. Hisoka Maijiba number 2 went to UK and Europe, and they found out post office collect savings. So he wanted to start postal savings in Japan, and he went to the biggest temple, number 4. And Buddhist monk said, to promote savings does not fit Japanese custom. So he was denied. Then he started children's savings bank. So that is the postmaster goes to school every month. Then school children started to save $1 every month. Then at the end of the 6th year, they have some amount of savings. And these kind of children's and school savings had promoted the access to finance and also the savings customs. Okay. Then in Japanese case, these money were used for industrial development, strengthening of key industries, and infrastructure investment. And last row is for housing. So housing loans, loans to SME, loans to infrastructure investment. And these money have been utilized in social development. Then some empirical analysis of the access to post office is very important. This is the postal savings divided by ordinary private bank deposits. Then ratio of post office to private banks. This is 47 prefectures and time series data, and access to finance explains very significantly in their behavior. Next topic is financial education. And once post office starts selling various products, then people has to learn, the financial literacy has to be improved, and financial education is needed. So we did survey study of Japanese junior high school and high school, and what kind of financial educations have been pursued, and is it enough or not. And 4,462 schools responded. We did it for all over Japan, but 4,462 schools has been responded. Then to one, number of hours to be taught in junior high school. 0 hour is 74.2%. So most of the schools has no financial education in first year of junior high school. Second year, 0 hours is 55.2. And third year, 1 to 5, 44.6, 6 to 10 is 37.2. So third year of junior high school, teachers start to teach in their courses. And this is high school, 0 and 1 to 5 hours. So you can see the number of hours which has been taught is very small compared to other subjects. And all the teachers said absolutely needed much more time and lack of time to teach financial education. Then why many teachers are not so willing to teach these financial education? And they said they have to allocate much more time to other subjects, because many junior high school and high school students want to go to good school. And in entrance examination of university, there is no financial education is asked. Then students are not eager to study. Number two, teachers do not know the subject well, which I'll talk about what kind of background each teacher has, and shortage of textbooks. And those are the major reasons why not enough time has been allocated. And this is the specialties of teachers. And number three is economics and business. Background is only 13.1%. So these are the entire teacher, 4,462 schools. Then Department of Education, 7.3%. And Department of Housing, Household Living, 28.8%. So most of the teachers in junior school, junior high school, and high school are not specialized in economics or business. So they tend to teach their own background. So that is one reason why financial education is lacking in Japan. This is the answers. How much percent of the teachers feel financial education is needed? This one is positive, definitely needed. This is needed, and these teachers are not needed. So you can see junior high school, almost all the teachers say we need financial education. And this is the number of hours which has been allocated. And left-hand side is 0 hours. This is between 1 to 5 hours and more than 6 hours. So most of the levels, financial education is less than 5 hours. Then for the student side, why financial education is not so favorable? One is subjects are nothing to do with their daily life. And number two, difficult to understand and lack of textbook materials. And the teacher's side, teachers admit financial education is important, 73.5% says. And however, they don't know how to provide educations. These are the answers. The left-hand side is difficult for students to understand, lack of expertise among teachers, and not enough lesson time, and also economy changes so much, and not so much good textbooks, and so on. And these are the major reasons why financial education, financial literacy education does not pursue so well in Japan. Okay, and financial educations are mainly taught in civics or home economics. So teachers just teach how to cook and how to solve things and so on. So they don't teach very much. And now we want to start video lectures for secondary school and high schools. And so that the teachers do not have to teach in the class, but the video lecture will be provided in their schools. And I hope that will enhance the number of hours in many schools. These are the education for schools, but not only for schools, but we need educations for retirees and also SMEs. And especially for elderly people, first they have to prepare for their money for after retirement. And then also pension system, 401k style pension system. It's a self-responsibility, what kind of assets the pension reserves should be invested. And also long-term insurance. So I think in facing with aging population, for many people require financial education. Otherwise their asset management will not go very well. This is a case of Japanese aging population. Top one is over 65 years of age. You can see it is aging so rapidly. And this is in many Asian countries. Top is Asia. I think second one is Korea, Taiwan. And third one is India, fourth one is Hong Kong, China. And you can see lots of the countries are facing with aging population after 2030 and so on. You can see Japan is far ahead of other countries. Then financial educations for old people are definitely needed. And social insurance expenditures are growing. The top is Japan, second is Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, and so on. Then again, the education is very needed. Then last two topics are financial education for SMEs. Many countries in SMEs, they don't have enough bookkeeping. So I think it is important first to teach them how to keep their books every day. And then they think about their daily revenues and expenses, and they start to think about long-term planning. And also the collecting those database will make SMEs much easier to borrow money from banks, because that will reduce information asymmetry between banks and SMEs. And number 6, SMEs not only important to borrow money, but also when SME make profits, they have to manage their assets. In Japanese case, many SMEs invest into huge amount of money to stock market. Then all of a sudden, they lose lots of money. So they know how to produce their products, own products, but they don't know any asset management. So I think SMEs are very important to learn this financial education. And last one is pension contributions by SMEs in Japan. 50% of pension money has to be contributed by employees themselves. And then employers also put 50% of the money together with the employees. Then the asset management of those pension reserves are very important. And they don't know how to manage those assets. So I think SME, even for SMEs, financial education is needed. And now I'm proposing local government should provide those teaching education systems because they are not in schools. So we need education for elderly people and SMEs. And this is a macroeconomic effect of financial education. So the portfolio widening will make their money into a little bit riskier sector, but expected growth will go up. Of course, volatility will increase, but the financial education will increase the expected growth of the country. Okay. And this is the survey conducted by World Bank Financial Literacy Survey. And OECD is also conducting those surveys. Question one is compounding interest rate. Second one is inflation. Third one is risk diversification. But surprisingly, in Chile, it's very high ranking compared to other countries. So I don't think this survey is so much reliable, but compared to US and other countries. And now OECD is doing a much better survey, and probably 2018 they are conducting those surveys. I hope nobody will come from Chile. But these are the rankings of that. Then this is another survey by MasterCard. Top one is New Zealand. Second is Singapore. Taiwan is third. Australia, number 4. Hong Kong, 5. Malaysia, 6. This is the order survey done by MasterCard. So these are the financial literacy scores. Okay, lastly, money lenders is another important thing for financial inclusion in Asia. Japan took about 20 years to include money lenders under the umbrella of financial regulation. And the new law was passed about 5 years ago. There are 4 criteria. Number 1, the total amount of borrowing for each individual has to be below 1/3 of their annual income. If they borrow more than 1/3, then they are very difficult to return their money. And ceiling interest rate in 15 years ago, 96% was interest rate. Then gradually diminished, and currently maximum interest rate money lenders can charge is 20%. And all borrowers' information now is centered by credit bureau. So every money lenders has to report how much money they are lending to each individual. Number 4, we introduced written examination to become money lender. And then minimum capital requirement is established. And financial services agencies started hotline from the customers. And if some of the money lenders is not doing well illegal activities, they can easily catch the complaints from various customers. So FSA, financial service agencies, use those hotlines and consumer complaints for the regulation of money lenders. So I think that not only access to finance, but also credit side of some of the regulations will be required. I think that's all my presentation. Thank you very much.
I think that he closed my. Let me get it back. Oh no, it's already here.
It's already here.
Here we go. Okay. So I actually, the paper that I read didn't talk much about the post office stuff. So I'm going to talk more about the financial literacy and financial education topics. Although I thought the post office part of the presentation was really interesting. I had two kind of thoughts about it. One is that it seemed like a lot of the intermediation being done by the post office in Japan is not actually on their own account. They're just delivering products from other agents. Either they're selling bonds or they're selling other security products from other companies, and they're just like a one-stop shopping physical place that you can go and have multiple choices, which I think is an interesting idea for economizing on infrastructure costs. But the other thought I had is that it was really interesting that Japan finances a lot of its infrastructure not from the general budget revenues, but from these postal savings. But I guess that means that they have to generate revenue from these infrastructure projects, so they must be charging tolls for roads and other things to provide return to those depositors, and that obviously leads into many issues of risk and whatnot. I guess if the government's standing behind it, that's fine, but that's probably an issue for this kind of a design. So on the financial inclusion and financial education part, I found this to be a really very useful description of the financial education and literacy efforts going on in Japan and some other countries in Asia, which are in the paper but weren't really described as much in the presentation. And I thought in particular there was a very detailed description of some of the specific programs that are being undertaken in different Asian countries. I think in Indonesia, people talked earlier, there's actually a national program to promote financial literacy. And I wasn't really aware of those efforts, and they seem very well-intentioned, and I think they're relatively new. I mean, I don't think the world has seen these types of programs very, very much, so I think there's a lot of learning to be done going forward. And I also really agree with the general, I think, idea of the presentation that this is really important to promote financial education and promote financial literacy, because having some understanding of financial issues has a lot of consequences for very key outcomes related to decision-making in households. One, of course, is savings and retirement planning. In the US, the emphasis is all about retirement planning, that people don't, and you know, they done a survey and found the level of financial preparation and knowledge is terrible, even in the US, where people are very well educated. So efforts are necessary even for very well educated people. And I actually don't think the emphasis should be on the elderly. I think you said elderly, train the elderly, but it's actually, you need to train people before they become old so they're prepared when they get old, right? At the time they're old, they're probably not earning a lot of income. They still need to manage their accounts well, but the preparation is key. And of course, on the credit side, you really need to educate people so they not only don't borrow too little, but also they don't borrow too much and become overly indebted unnecessarily, et cetera. And then of course there's a whole set of insurance products that are really, can be very valuable to individuals, whether it's health insurance, whether it's crop insurance or weather insurance for agricultural households and other types of insurance. So first order importance, I think, for improving welfare across various dimensions of economic well-being. But there's a lot of challenges, I think, so I think we have to be very careful about what we advise in terms of policy prescriptions, because we don't know very much, right? And the first issue is measuring financial literacy. There are now these cross-country measures of financial literacy. I think the most common one is based on these 3 questions that you put up there, right? But nobody has really investigated how relevant those 3 questions are to explaining actual behavior or ability to manage. And maybe there's another 3 questions or another 10 questions that would actually be much, much more useful for understanding the ability of people to manage their finances or their awareness of various types of risk, especially for, you can imagine the relevant questions are going to be different for rural households versus urban households, depending on the environment that people are living in. And we don't know anything, we haven't validated these measures, you know, like in psychology and other disciplines, they spend a lot of time validating and revalidating measures they have to try to measure concepts, and none of that has happened now. There was one person who decided to start to do this, and people thought, oh, that's pretty good, and so they just started repeating it, but nobody ever stopped to think, are these the right measures? So I think there's a lot of work to be done on that side. And then, even if we kind of can measure what the outcomes that we want to affect, now we need to think of how do we teach financial literacy, right? And this was not discussed that much in the presentation. But first of all, what you need to know, there's a huge amount of things you could teach, right? Whether it's about insurance or whether it's about credit or about risk or portfolio diversification, and for different audiences it'll be different, whether it's an entrepreneur or whether it's an old person, the kind of financial skills or tools they need are going to be different. But then how you teach is also going to be important, obviously. Just like in a classroom, teaching methods matter, right? I mean, you can teach people, but if it's not done the right way, they may not pick them or they may not retain any of it, right? And again, no absolutely vacuum of knowledge. I think there is one study that showed that if you try to make it too complicated, people just definitely won't. If you kind of teach some very simple rules of thumb, then maybe it'll have more of an impact. But again, so that's important because I think you need to have some confidence in what you're teaching before you endorse spending a lot of time and resources on it. So there needs to be a lot of preparation. And finally, from a research standpoint, if we wanted to study, does this particular model of teaching financial literacy actually impact the abilities of people to be financially literate? How on earth do we research that to verify that this is the case? And of course, then there have been some studies which have used kind of, there's a couple kind of where they've done some randomized treatments, very popular to do among development economists. And then there's also people who have looked at different natural experiments where certain cohorts of like military recruits were given some financial training where the previous cohorts were not, and then people followed them to see how various kinds of financial instruments they adopted, etc. So people have tried to think of strategy where you can identify the impacts more reliably, but I think here there really will be a large potential role for randomized control trials where you actually design a model or a teaching module, and then you go test it out, and do it to some people and not to other people, and see if you have an effect and if that gets retained. And this is a method which is becoming increasingly popular. But I think there's a whole lot of work that needs to be done before we are ready to kind of be very confident about how we actually do impact financial literacy.
Right, so you have questions?
Yeah.
Thank you, Yoshino-san. It was a very interesting paper. I have three sort of questions, comments. First, by looking at how extensive this postal savings network is, I was wondering, would there be a sort of potential gain that if we can somehow channel the remittances through the postal savings? I know, postal savings is quite popular in only limited countries like Japan and then also Korea. Back in, I think, 70s, 80s, not anymore. But given this very extensive network, is there like a way of exploring how to link this, the remittances? Remittances always come in a way very decentralized, and then we always try to find a way how to maximize the, somehow also being able to centralize the remittances for the use of the development. So that's one. Another one is I do appreciate that there's going to be some sort of a relationship between the financial literacy and inclusion, but I don't really think we have actually seen any empirical analysis on sort of what will be the actual benefits, what will be the effect of financial literacy on inclusion. Some research question I thought interesting to explore. Finally, I kind of felt that when you talk about this ranking, in a way, I think given the experience actually in Korea, I felt that when there's a financial crisis, actually it kind of increases the financial awareness. So Chile might be that sort of a example. It's not necessarily like a financially very secure or advanced economies where the financial literacy is very high, because they don't have to worry about too much. They just make a deposit, and then they have a bit of a sense of complacency, especially in I think Asian countries in the prior to the crisis. A lot of people actually felt the deposit at any bank was safe because it was implicitly guaranteed by the government. So then you don't really learn too much about like how to manage it. And then crisis changed the entire concept actually. You are responsible for your own money, even if it is deposited in a bank. So it gives like a really completely a new dimension to approaching this sort of like a financial literacy and an awareness. So maybe I don't know, like maybe I haven't seen the entire list of the countries, but if you actually sort of differentiate the countries where the financial sort of instability or banking crisis happen, and then the countries where the implicit guarantees still exist, I think the financial literacy will be affected in a way. But empirical questions, leave it up to you. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Do you want to respond to the first two? Because we have 3 more questions. Or do you want
Okay. Can I just
Yes,
respond?
please.
Thank you very much, Professor Albert Park. I think as far as education is concerned, in Japan we have started to create a matrix, and which will be published next month. And starting from primary school, secondary school, high school, and university, what kind of items should be preferably taught, and that will hopefully become one of the patterns for Japan. That is one. Then evaluation is also we have to do it, and looking at how much hours can be spent and so on. And OECD is now trying in 2018 the entire survey to several countries. So I think that will become first step to the evaluation. Then again, whether the financial literacy or financial education can improve outcome of the performance is another question too, related to yours. Yeah. So probably what I can do is looking at these countries, whether financial access will improve their economic growth or crisis management and so on. Probably it may not be so related, but I'd like to write it. Thank you very much. And a post office network. I think remittances are used in Japan, and Germany and France has also big network. So continental Europe has a postal network, including Sweden. And I don't know whether Finland may have postal networks. So UK and the USA postal network has been abolished. So I think there are 2 different groups. One still has postal networks. So I think especially in developing countries, post offices are already existing. So it is better first to utilize those networks, selling private financial products, maybe accelerate the financial inclusion. Thank you very much.
So there are 4 questions. Mandira, Rajesh, Kishan, and Jia. Go ahead.
I was just curious, in spite of having low, or in spite of not having a structured financial literacy program in Japan, as discussed by you, the level of financial inclusion is quite high. So I was wondering, maybe the banks themselves are doing some amount of literacy. Maybe the bank managers are themselves explaining the different products to their clients and things like that. Unlike in many countries, for example in India, bank managers don't really entertain clients in explaining the products and things like that. So maybe that is one of the reasons why in Japan the level of financial inclusion is quite high in spite of not having a very strong financial literacy program. And the second question is that in the secondary level or school level financial literacy education, what kind of education is given? Is it like how a compound interest is calculated or things like that? Because these are standard modules for arithmetic, I think, in school level. So are they also considered as financial literacy program, or what is the content of the financial literacy program in the schools? Thank you.
Rajesh?
Yeah, mine is just a quick comment on the Chile thing. Actually, it's not that surprising that we find those results, the Chile being so advanced, because Chile was, I think, was the first country where they made the move from pay-as-you-go pension system to the fully funded pension system. And I think borrowing a little bit from the practical necessity of knowledge, most Chileans had to figure out what to do with their pension money. And so I'm not saying that led to this, what I'm finding is even the Americans, when they started reforming their pension system, they were looking at Chile as the model to do it. So in some ways, I don't find this that surprising.
I see. Thank you very much. Especially last comment about Chile. Yeah, that's very good. So I can put it in the footnote. And as for education, first, I think why Japan has been so much high savings rate. I think access to finance. Postal network is very close to their home. So people go to post office, then there are 3 different counters. One is mail, postal savings, and postal insurance. So people tend to have so much access. That's why that is one. Secondly, government has promoted the savings custom, including primary school, children's education, children savings account. That also created. But on the other hand, share of deposits are very high in Japan. People can put their money in the post office or banks. And stock market, bond market, mutual funds are relatively very small. So in that sense, I think much more education will be needed. In these 20 years, Japanese economic growth is very much slower. I think that partly comes from banks' Basel capital requirement. Huge deposits are coming into bank, but they have to follow the Basel capital requirement. In the old days, banks are lending money to risky SMEs, to very large companies. All the portfolio was handled by banks. But Basel capital requirement, banks are reluctant to make risky loans. Then startup businesses and SMEs become very difficult to borrow money from banks. But individual has to widen their portfolio investment in various financial products. I think that related to the financial education. So there are high savings rate, but most of them goes to banks. Lack of financial education. And then the items of each education is we have set it up in the primary school, secondary school, high school, and in higher level we are looking at risks and returns and so on, and university of course variances and standard errors and so on. So starting from very basic and going to really upward.
Last 2 questions, Jean and Kishan.
I have a comment about the financial education. I'm a little bit skeptical about teaching students, especially at the early age, about financial education, because even when I was in elementary school, there was a compulsory saving, like every month or every week you have to save $1. That felt so unfair to us, to most of us. That only discouraged us from, future saving behavior, I think. And second thing is, I think it's more important to get educated when you actually get your own income. So I think the best age for financial education would be when you first have your salary or your job. I think that would be more practical and appropriate age.
I see. Yeah. Okay. Then that is not a school education. After they graduate, then we have to find out a way to teach them.
Right.
Okay.
Just going back to the comments that were made about financial literacy and maybe people didn't worry so much about it because the system generally was so stable. I think in some sense you could argue that the financial system in Japan, at least before the 1990s, always favored stability over efficiency. And so it might have, and Postal Savings Network being such a credible system, might have been victim of its own success in terms of people didn't really worry about financial literacy was there. It would be interesting. I mean, I'm looking at New Zealand here, right? And so it's probably, I don't know if it can be done, but I don't know when New Zealand stopped offering deposit insurance banks. And then sort of to look at the situation, an event like that, post removal of deposit insurance, where households have to worry about the safety of their savings, etc. Did that then lead to greater levels of financial literacy, other things being equal? So something along those lines might be interesting to look at. Albert's completely right about this need for RCT kind of things. You can't, because we make a jump, right? From yes, there's low level of financial literacy, therefore we need education, but then there's a big jump here. I'm thinking in the US, for instance, so Lusardi, I think, who was at Dartmouth, who's now at GW, she spent a lot of her efforts was really about financial literacy and surveys, etc. But she didn't really, and so she ended up, a lot of her research ended up saying, yes, so we need to do something here. But something what? It's not just a matter of curriculum development, etc. We see how effective they are. And so last few years, there's been a lot of RCT type of stuff in the US looking at, I don't know about, I'm not an expert in this area, but certainly that's an area to look at.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. You have any other
Okay, so that's
Okay.
all are very good comments. Thank you very much.